May the words of my mouth, the meditations of our hearts be acceptable in your sight, O Lord, our strength and our Redeemer. Amen. So this past week had something pretty interesting happen. So here's the story. So I was doing just some routine maintenance on my son's mountain bike. I was overhauling his rear shock, and you got to take it off the bike, pull it apart, and do it. So I was doing that, and I was in a hurry because he wanted to go out and ride it. This is after work, Thursday evening. And so while I'm doing this, my son, he's kind of standing around the workbench, and he's saying something like, "When are you going to be done, Dad? Are you done yet? How much longer do you think it will take?" Right? And so I told him, and really I told him this just to kind of get him off my back. But I told him, okay, go wash your bike. And then when you're done, I'll be done with this, and we'll put it all back together. You get the idea. So he took his bike, he went outside in the backyard around the house, and he started washing it. I finished up, replacing the seals on this shock. And so then he got done, I got done, and we got the bike back on the stand. And I go to put the shock back in. And so the shock attaches with these two bolts at the bottom. And the bolts are in these they go through a little bushing. And what I had done was I left those little bushings sitting in the holes. And so he went out into the backyard with two bushings and came back with one. So I'm like, oh my gosh. That means that, and here it is. So that means that somewhere in our backyard is this little bushing in the grass, right? And so this is not, let me just say, this is not a generic part. This is precision, specialty part made specifically for that year, make, model. And so finding another one of these, that means like an extensive internet search and shipping and ordering. This is going to be a week. It means we're not going to have a bike for a week, which in the McIntyre house, strangely, that's a big deal. And so, of course, we did our due diligence. We went to the backyard. We look around for about 20 minutes, kind of going through the grass, just trying to find this thing. But it's like a needle in a haystack. So at some point, we just decided to be big boys about the whole thing. And we went and rode our road bikes. So then later on that evening, we're having dinner. We're sitting there. It's later because this all took time, and all of a sudden, the power goes out. I don't know if you heard, but like 4,000 people in North Mech lost power Thursday evening. So, like we do, we start looking around the house for flashlights. I remember out in my truck, I've got like a really good flashlight. And so I go out to my truck and I get my flashlight, and it's a flashlight, right? Yeah. Yeah. So I'm going back into the house, and I'm walking through the yard, and I'm realizing I can see every bug. I can see every ant. I can see every little twig. I can see it all. And so I'm like, I have an idea. I bet I can find that thing now. And so I just went and I retraced the steps, and in about, less than a minute, the light picked up the sheen on the metal, and there it was, happy day. It was a really great feeling. And so I got to reflecting on this, what made the difference? It wasn't that I had more light, right? It was night when I was doing this. It was day when we were looking for it before. What made the difference is that I had very different light. That's all it took. And so you may be wondering by now, what on earth does this have to do with Jesus and the gospel? So here it is. This is what Jesus does for us again and again and again. He helps us to see the world and our lives with new light. And that helps us to find what we are looking for. We see the world and life's meaning and our place in the world. We see that through the light of Christ differently. It's a new light. You know, it's like we're looking at the same world, but through the teachings of Jesus, you know, that helps us kind of see past the clutter and the distractions and the things that don't matter, through the grass, the weeds, to see and to really highlight the things that do matter. Jesus shines a different light on the subject. And that helps us to see things that we could not see before. I mean, in the gospel passage today, the Pharisees are distracted and blinded by their old worldview, their old customs, the old way of just kind of seeing and interpreting the law, seeing the world. That's all they see. And then we read where Jesus shines a light on what really matters, the heart of what matters. And so in our gospel today, and really throughout the Gospels, Jesus shines a light on many of the old ways of thinking, kind of these ingrained human tendencies, ways, cycles of thinking. And he confronts, and he challenges, and he helps people to see the past, to see the old ways, the old customs, the old worldviews, to see past that, to find the truth in the weeds. Today we hear how the Jewish scribes and the Pharisees, these are like the keepers of the law, they had this ritual, right, where they would wash their hands before they ate. It makes sense. We all do that. But this was, you don't do that? Rick gave me a look like, you might do that, but okay, most of us wash our hands before we eat. But this was before they knew about germs, right? All right. So for them, washing their hands, that was tied to their purity laws. But it's interesting. What's interesting is that there's actually no specific law in the Bible that requires this. In one place, the Bible does say that priests must wash their hands before they go to the altar. The Bible does say that, you know, everyone should be holy as God is holy. And then you go, in another place, the Hebrews thought they should be a priestly kingdom, a holy nation. And so you kind of put all this together, and you kind of get to this place where, yeah, all right, everybody should be washing their hands. That's what scholars think. But if you would have asked, I think if you would have asked the scribes, the Pharisees, like, why do you wash your hands? I mean, who knows what they would have really said. But essentially the real answer is, because we have always done it that way. Because we've always seen the world this way. Human laws and human precepts, they become enshrined doctrines. And these hand-me-down rules, some kind of have a way of kind of becoming sacred. And not the real heart, not the real intent of God's commandment. And so today we hear where the prophet Isaiah says, you abandon the commandments of God to hold to human tradition. And then about 7 centuries after Isaiah, it seems like Jesus spent a lot of his career in ministry saying about the same thing as Isaiah, going around and just saying, it's the heart of the law that matters, and not the letter of the law, not the history of the law, not the tradition of the law. It's the heart of the law. That's what God cares about. That's what Jesus shines his light on. That's what Jesus is trying to help people see in the darkness, right? It's not that the letter of the law is a bad thing. I mean, washing your hands is not a bad thing. Making yourself pure, right? That's not a bad thing. But it might not be the most important thing either. Being overly distracted by doing things like washing your hands before a meal is not the truth that Jesus wants his followers to focus on. It's not the most important part of sharing a meal. Breaking bread, right? Jesus would probably say, being grateful to God for the food that's on your table, that's what he would shine a light on. He would say, loving the people around your table, whether they're clean or not, that's what he would shine a light on. Jesus, he shines his light kind of on the real issues, the real problems of the world and our lives. And this is kind of actually, I think, a much healthier way to think about what we call God's judgment, or the judgment of Christ. I mean, so here's what I mean. Like, thinking about a God that just simply finds you guilty or not guilty, that's not a very helpful, I guess, practical theology. And it really kind of gives, I think, Jesus and Jesus' judgment a bad name in some ways. A healthier way, I think, to think about Jesus as a judge is where he shines a light on the problems and the backwards thinking and the hardness of heart and the injustice and the darkness of the world. He shines his light there, and he's like, look over there. That's where the real issue is. And that's what he does in this gospel today, actually, when he says, the problem is not dirty hands, the problem is a dirty heart. Jesus is saying, don't look under your fingernails for the dirt. Look under your skin. Look inside. Shine a light, that light of right judgment inside you. Because sometimes that's where you'll find the real dirt. Things like, and then he gives this list, anger, violence, envy, runaway pride. I mean, he's got a good list in there. Jesus says, this is where the real evil in the world comes from, and it doesn't come from dirty hands. And Jesus shines that light. He says, take a good look, at what's inside, of what really defiles, and maybe think about how that filth works its way out, from the inside out. About how maybe our inner pain, our inner skewed thinking, our bad habits, about how all that stuff just kind of has this way of leaking out into our families and into our communities, out into the world. And then I think about, I think about kind of the collective effect of us all doing that at the same time. I mean, spewing our junk into the world, it's like, no wonder we have such a crazy world. This is a difficult teaching. And this is where the light of the gospel challenges us as followers of Christ. This is the hard work of the gospel, shining that light inward hard work. So here's the good news. Jesus is the light of the world. He is our light. He shines light in the darkness. He helps us to see the world in a different light, to see past all of the noise and distractions and the dysfunction and the culture. And when we turn that light inward on our hearts and when we shine it on the brokenness of this world, and maybe we kind of do see that laundry list of sin like we have in our gospel today, the good news is that the cure for all of this is in there too. And so we see kind of throughout the Gospels how Jesus shines a light on that stuff too. How Jesus will always shine a light on our human capacity to love and to forgive, to be generous, to do justice. It's like right beside that laundry list of stuff, the sin is the cure. And so then our calling, and probably our real duty as Christians, as followers of Christ, is to go and light up the world. Amen.